Hello and welcome to Public Speaking Using Logic in Speeches. I'm Jason and I'm going to be telling you how to use logic in your public speeches. Thank you very much and enjoy the ride. To review what we spoke about in our previous class, which is the monomyth and once upon a time story structure that breaks a story into 3 acts that start once upon a time. We have a nice drill on this and we can see how this outlines the different parts of a story. Today, we are going to be talking about logic in public speaking and using I think, therefore I am, cognito ergo sum. And this is, of course, a very famous quote by Descartes, who questioned everything. I think we already watched this video in a different class, but it ties very nicely into this lesson with start with why. And we're going to be seeing why is such a powerful idea, and we'll watch a different video a different time. Okay, so logic. Logic is the study or use of reasoning to distinguish good reason from bad reason, which are called valid and or fallacious arguments. So logic is the study of reason. It's a formula, an algorithm, kind of like algebra in a certain sense, like a philosophical algebra. There's a right and a wrong way to use logic, and there are formal rules which are important to the application of using logic and what is considered logical. What is reason? So the process of thinking about something in order to make a decision, that's reason. The reason we do something is the purpose of it. The process of thinking about something in order to make a decision. Reason, which comes from rationale. So let's take it back into the 1596 to 1650 range with a guy called René Descartes, who was a French philosopher. He was considered the first of the modern rationalists. Descartes' writing lay the foundation for the Enlightenment, or the Age of Reason, the foundation of the scientific revolution whose ideas on scientific method are what we still use today. And of course, he was part of the Enlightenment period, which emphasized science and logic while opposing the absolute monarchy and religious dogma. He said, "It is necessary at least once in a lifetime to doubt all things." And we're going to talk more about what that means. But he arose in an era where the truth was handed down, and that was it, regardless of how it interconnected to reality. So there are things he thought that were demonstrably true, and he set out to prove them. So the Age of Enlightenment. Enlightenment was the idea that reason, evidence of the senses, was the primary source of knowledge. Scent, smell, sight, hearing, touch, and there's one more that I'm forgetting, but you fill in the blank. That's the 5 senses. And he thought that those were the foundation of knowledge. Like if you could touch or see something, it was real. An era of scientific revolution was rapidly advancing ideas based on detailed observation and deductive reasoning. That's observing nature and forming a theory through experimentations. Science, of course, is about the observation of details when you change ingredients to see how they react. Science is about experimenting with experiments that yield the same results that are considered accurate and reliable because they're repetitive and anyone anywhere can reproduce them. So gravity is something that we can all test anywhere that we are, and it will work the same way everywhere. And deductive reasoning are the ideas that are ruled out because they don't fit with the observation, versus inductive reasoning, which is opening up ideas. Descartes was a radical skepticist. Radical skepticism is a philosophical view that questions the possibility of what is real by doubting the existence of everything. In his search for truth, Descartes cast aside everything that he knew. And so we should take a second to think about what we know, language, thought, color, and put that all in a box and think about how we get rid of everything that we know that we know. Sometimes I have a moment in life where I realize that I don't know anything. I'm just like, I've been alive for 35 years and I don't know. I just don't know. And there's a very classical, there's a very contemporary um, piece of culture that ties into this idea of what is real. We're going to touch on that in a second. But we should ask the question, how do you know anything? And what if this was Descartes' idea to set up a scenario that we could relate to? What if an all-powerful demon or a superpower AI was fooling you and everything that you see or touch or feel is synthetic, is just you being manipulated? Like, what if everything that you think you know and see and experience isn't real? What if there is the ultimate illusion and considered the ultimate level of doubt in the form of an actively deceiving, all powerful entity? He called it a demon. We could call it something else. Even though an all powerful entity is deceiving him, Descartes finds that it is impossible to doubt that he exists. So that's a really interesting idea. There's something that's smarter, more powerful, more advanced than I am that's fooling me in every possible way. But I still know I exist because he exists. No one could be deceived unless one existed in order to be deceived. So there was a logical argument here that he found, and that's he could doubt the existence of everything or everyone around him, but he couldn't doubt that he was, because to be deceived, he had to exist. So he proved to himself and to us that he exists. There is a deceiver of supreme power and cunning who deliberately and constantly deceives me. If that case, I too undoubtedly exist, even if he deceives me. And let him deceive me as much as he can, he will never bring it about that I am nothing, so long as I think that I am something. So after considering everything very thoroughly, I must finally conclude that the proposition I am, I exist is necessarily true. Whenever it is put forward by me or conceived by my mind, I think, therefore I am. He said it a little bit differently, and he also said it in Latin, which is cognito ergo sum. So let's take it forward to today into a very contemporary piece of culture. The Matrix is Descartes' idea. There's a superpower robotic society that's tapping into everybody's brain and feeding them an elaborate illusion. Of course, we all remember the Matrix fondly, maybe the first one more than any other one. And these characters, we're seeing a view of them in their deceived form, and these are the people who realize that they are being deceived. And here's a fun, for those of you who do not know what the Matrix is, I'm going to tell the Matrix to you in a once upon a time story and show you how this template can help us organize almost any story. So once upon a time, machines took over the world, and every day they powered themselves using electricity harvested from humans they grew in vats. And every day the human minds were kept active in a fake world called the Matrix, which simulated life in 1999. Until one day, a human named Neo chose to take the red pill and woke up to learn the Matrix wasn't real. And because of that, we had a Hollywood blockbuster movie where the robots fought the humans and the people realized that they were sleeping. So, radical skepticism. What is really real? Are we in the Matrix? Descartes got to what he called the first certainty. You cannot doubt your own existence. I think means I must exist to think means that I am. And we can see that it's structured as a math problem with the equals indicating the train of thought, which is what it means that there's a chain of logic that each each step, each derivation, each deduction leads to a new conclusion, which brings us further along in the chain. So that's a very fun way to set up a logical problem. And there's an entire math language dedicated to that. There it is again. I saw very clearly that all truths were linked with one another, so that finding a fundamental truth and proceeding with logic would open the way to all science. So we can see what it means, like visually in text, what it means to link truths with math symbols. And the idea that truth is linked. Why does all this matter? Explaining our statements. Logic is showing good reason. The use of logic gives sound reasoning to our claims. A good because to answer why a question uses logic to persuade. Logic is showing good reason, and argumentation is persuasion using logic. If somebody doesn't have a logical argument, we're probably not going to believe it. We're going to say, that's silly. If I tell you that a cake is made by freezing dough, you'll be like, that's silly. I know that's not true. That's illogical. That's not real. So if something is illogical, people tend to reject it. And we're going to take a little derivation to talk about argumentation and applying logic using the seek method. And of course, we're going to explain what seek is. So an argument is a reason or set of reasons given with the aim of persuading others that an action or idea is right or wrong. A reason is a justification or an explanation. An argument explains something. So using reasons to persuade is called an argument, and has a lot of functions. So this is the seek formula for stronger arguments. Statement, explanation, example, conclusion. There it is, seek. Statement, explanation, example, conclusion. Let's take a second to think about that, and then we're going to break it down letter by letter. Statement, a definite, clear expression of something in a speech or writing with a moral context. A moral context. Statements provide information through words which tell us what to do with the information by giving a positive or a negative context. A statement is a clear expression of something in speech or writing with a positive or negative context. An example is, Australia is beautiful. Always fly American Airlines. No one should possess nuclear weapons. These are statements. The words that tell us the information is positive or negative in the argument and the statement is the word beautiful tells us about Australia. We know beautiful is a good thing, so now we know Australia is good because Australia is beautiful. Always fly American Airlines. It's a direction telling us what to do. Like, this is a good, like, always fly American Airlines. You choose it because it's good, so it's good. No one should possess nuclear weapons. No one should possess this thing. Like, these are bad. So this tells us that people shouldn't possess something bad. An explanation. This is the word because. Australia is beautiful because of the coral reef. Always fly American Airlines because they have the lowest prices. No one should possess nuclear weapons because if one goes off, the damage is unthinkable. The word because. Because explains a statement. It also answers the question why. Why use the word because? Because answers the question why. I should write that down. An example proves what you're saying exists in the real world. Give an example to prove it's true. Australia is beautiful because of the coral reef, which was voted by National Geographic as the most beautiful corals in the world. It's an example. There's a real context to this that is held in good esteem that tells us about this statement. Always fly American Airlines because they have the lowest prices. Last month, they had 50% off deal to every locations. Proof they are the cheapest. No one should possess nuclear weapons because if one goes off, the damage is unthinkable. After Hiroshima bombing of 1945, along with a huge loss of life, thousands died in pain from dehydration and the land was contaminated for decades. What a powerful example that proves that nuclear weapons are a horrible thing. Conclusion. Repeat the statement, and that's why. Remember, since you began your speech, you probably said a lot, which, judging by how long I've been talking, is probably true. So by the end of the speech, people may forget what we're talking about. So it's good to remind. Conclude by reminding everyone what we're talking about with a conclusion. And that's why Australia is beautiful. And that's why you should always fly American Airlines. And that's why no one should possess nuclear weapons. Seek. Statement, example, statement, explanation, example, conclusion. Powerful stuff. Questions. Now let's find that last slide that I'm looking for. Okay, great. So here's a great drill. We're going to come back to this in a second. I'm going to introduce it and then look for the other drill. Here's a way to use a seek argument in class. I, Jason, am for sending Israeli doctors to other countries to treat coronavirus. Because Israeli doctors are very skilled. For example, Israel set up hospitals in emergency locations all over the world. And that's why we should send Israeli doctors to treat people around the world. So this is the statement, because, for example, and that's why. We're going to come back to that. And here is the drill written more clearly. Statement, because, for example, and that's why. We're going to come back to that. Possible reasons for not sending the doctors. The doctors might get infected and might bring the contagion back. There might be a shortage of doctors in Israel because we send the doctors abroad. Possible explanation for yes, because the people cured will have a better image of Israel. So examples and explanations that are both for and against the argument. So there's more time for question. Okay, great. Here we go. We're going to talk more about logic. All right, so it's not extra, it's just included. Logic is one of the formal tools of persuasion, which include ethos, pathos, and logos, these very Greek words. Ethos is expert knowledge. If there's a professional in a field like a car mechanic, we trust this expert to know about how to fix our car. If there's a legal expert, we trust this person to know about the law, like a lawyer. These are, or a medical expert who we trust to know about treating our ails. So maybe we're not all experts except in our own lives and our own stories, which brings us to pathos, emotion, appeals through passion. We see this a lot with internet trolling, where people try to convince us that they had something so bad happen to them that we have to, sympathize with them, and whoever did this to them is an evil person and a monster. Appeals through passion, and of course tragedy is a very persuasive appeal. Help me, I'm suffering. Let's connect through our shared humanity that you don't want me to suffer. Passionate storytelling could also be positive, by the way. It doesn't have to be. It could be hopeful. It could be inspiring. It focuses on conveying an emotion as the message of the story. In Western culture, we like stories that end with a hopeful message. And I think in schools especially, we should really focus on inspiring and infusing hope into our lessons. And this lesson was the use of logic, logos, and reasoned proof. And we talked about the seek argument, statement, example, explanation, and conclusion. But we're going to talk more about logic. So an argument is sound if it is both valid in form and the premises are true. Logic systems are sound if and only if every formula that can be proved in the system is also valid. So it's sometimes known as a premise proof. A premise is a statement that an argument claims will induce or justify a conclusion. The proof of a conclusion depends on both the truth of the premise and the validity of the argument. A true premise: all men are mortal. Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. That's a true premise because we know that people are mortal from our own lived experience. A false premise: all birds can fly. Penguins are a bird, therefore penguins can fly. We know this is false because we know penguins are a popular species of marine bird. They're beautiful and they're rare, and that's why we know so much about them. Inductive versus deductive reasoning. Observation, generalizations, theory. So in inductive reason, you're opening up ideas. You're observing the world and making big generalizations and going out from there to make a theory. Versus deductive reasoning, where you have a theory, and from the theory you make predictions and experiment on the predictions and deduce and reduce. You reduce the amount of variables. All right, so tying it back to Descartes. Now that you know you exist, what do you do with existence? Oh, this is good. I actually really like this. Probably because I wrote this, but it's a great question. What do you do with existence? And it turns out we've talked a little bit about this before when we talked about Maslow. And if we tie these ideas logically together, what do we do with existence? We climb Maslow's ladder of self-actualization. We move from the basic needs up through psychological needs into self-fulfillment and achieving our potential by making creative activities. So the theory of this course is that if we exist, we're supposed to do something with existence. And part of the purpose of education is to help our students self-actualize. So our purpose is to help achieve self-actualization so people can find meaning in their own lives. And we work our way up from there. We remember Frankl, who said that we exist to find meaning. And that's a primary motivational force of an individual, is to find meaning in their life and their unique individual purpose. And Maslow's ladder shows us how to find meaning. Why do we exist? To find meaning. How do we find meaning? By climbing Maslow's ladder. This is interesting. Here's another activity. How do I know game? I know I exist. How do I know you exist? Oh, that's a really good question. I know I exist. Okay, we just talked about Descartes for half an hour and his logical proof of thinking. And, he proved that, he existed to himself. But how do I know you exist? You're just a couple pixels on a screen. How do you know I exist? Well, I asked a philosophy PhD student, and I got a really good answer, inspiring answer. I'm going to tell you the answer that I found very inspiring. How do you know I exist? Because I'm teaching you something that you don't know from your own knowledge. And you don't know that you know it because every time you hear something that's innovative and new, you know where it came from. I know the idea "I think, therefore I am" came from Descartes. I know that something outside of me must exist to give me new information. Otherwise, these aren't things that I would deduce from my own experience. So if you teach someone something, you prove that you exist. I don't think we're going to do that. We might come back to that. Okay, I don't want to do that. We're not going to do that. We could do that. Activities. Very good. All right. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to our class on using logic in public speaking and talk about Descartes and I think, therefore I am. Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to our next lesson together.